Hello, fellow creators. In this episode, we'll talk about this new and exciting feature that just shipped yesterday in the next Canary versions called route handlers. Route handlers basically help you define server-side API endpoints inside the app directory. So if you just see the announcement tweets, there are several things it brings to the table. First, it supports pre-rendering or incremental static rendering. Second, it's powered by Web API, which means you can use the standard request and response APIs to serve your responses or to access the request. Third is the multi-runtime support, which means the same API handler will run on your Node.js side or as well as your Edge side. Fourth, declarative method-based routing. You'll be able to use the verbs in the same handler to serve requests for a get method or a post method or a put or a delete method. And fifth is the streaming support, right? So let's just open the documentation and see the different offerings in detail. So route handlers allow you to create custom request handlers for a given route using the web request and response API, which means we are able to use the standard request and response API now instead of next request or next response inside the API handler. It's a great addition because now this standardizes the request and response model like many other meta frameworks out there. The request handlers take advantage of the app router, which includes support for nested routes. It means that the app directory model that we follow for pages and layouts and stuff will be able to follow the same for route also. Just like page.tsx or layout.tsx will be able to place route.ts file inside the app directory to create API handlers. Further, they can be used with other server-side functions like cookies and headers. So just like your pages, you'll be able to use both these modules, cookies and headers, inside your API handlers too, right? Which means you won't have to rely on something like a request.headers. You can directly access cookies using the cookies function and then access the values. It says that route handlers have an isomorphic API to support both Edge and Node.js runtime seamlessly, including support for streaming. Since route handlers use the same route segment configuration as pages and layout, they support long-awaited features like general-purpose statically generated route handlers, right? So now the API handlers are not just something that will get called at runtime or something that will just support the dynamic features, right? They can be called at build time to generate static responses. The following HTTP methods are supported: get, post, put, patch, delete, head, and options. See the API reference for more details. The convention that, as we discussed, it's route.js or TS file inside your app directory. Be careful around where you put this. This cannot be parallel to a page.ts file. Static and dynamic route handlers. Route handlers default to static rendering, which means they will run at compile time. Static rendering can be beneficial to generate custom route handlers for robot.txt, RSS XML, sitemap XML, and stuff. Can embed dynamic manually using the route segment config. They will become dynamic automatically if a dynamic function is used. Now, dynamic functions are the cookies function and the header function, right? And route segment config, which means all of this, right? So this is available in Canary. So let's go ahead and install the Next.js Canary version. Create Next app Canary. Yep. So let's call this Canary. Would you like to use TypeScript? Yep, we'd like to go ahead with TypeScript. For this one, let's say no. Would you like source directory with this project? No. We don't want a source directory. Hit enter. Would you like experimental app directory? Yes. What import ls would you like configured? Yep. Let it be installed. This is installed now. Let's go inside the directory. Canary. Open our code editor. Inside your code editor, open the app directory. There, let's go ahead and create a new folder, API. Within the API, just go ahead and create a new file, route.ts. So the convention we follow here is all verbs per file pattern, which means that inside a single file, you describe all of your functions named by the verbs they can respond to. So you go ahead and you say something like export async function get, and there you can handle your get request, right? Similarly, you can have other callbacks like one for a put or one for a post, right? Similarly, you can have functions named by all of the verbs, right? So this can be your options. This can be delete, right? And this can be a patch, right? So you describe all of those handler functions inside one file, which is the route.ts file. So as doing this, want to install the canary version. To install the canary version, what we'll have to do, so we'll just go ahead and say npm install next @canary. Let's go back to our code editor. Here we see that Next.js canary version is installed now, which points to canary 19, right? Save this, go back to your terminal, and here just run the development command again. Experimental features are enabled. Let the project compile. Once the project is compiled, let's just go ahead and open the home page, right? So we are at the canary version. So with Next.js, you get an API directory right inside pages, right? This has been the stable form of defining API handlers JS. What we'll do now is we'll take this entire directory and we'll move this inside app directory, right? You can create a new directory instead. We just wanted to show that this directory is not needed anymore, right? Once this is here, what we'll be able to do now is we can just make this a get, make this an async, and here you can say, then just copy this, return next response .json, paste this data, get rid of this, convert this into just a request. We don't need this. We don't need this. Save this. Right. So that's the convention we follow. We use a asynchronous function. We provide the name of the verb we want to handle, and then we just serve the response. Right. So let's just save this and see if we are able to still see the hello endpoint. So go ahead and here say API hello. Right? Will this work? No, it won't work, right? So to support this, what we'll have to do is we'll have to create a new folder over here called hello. So this is going to be the name of our endpoint. We'll have to move our handler file inside the directory and rename this to root.ts. Save this. Will this work now? Let's see. It did work. We are not seeing anything else, but we are seeing an empty page. This cannot be default, right? There needs to be multiple verb functions out of this file, so you'll have to get rid of a default. There cannot be one single default, right? Save this. This compile for us. Come back and let's do this again. So now we have a response, right? So now our app directory is not just capable of serving pages or layout. Now we can have API handlers parallel to our pages, right? It follows the same convention as the pages and layouts. So you will have to create a directory, and inside the directory you can have a route.ts file. One thing you should always keep in mind that this route.ts file cannot be parallel to the page.tsx file because then there will be a conflict, right? Next.js wouldn't know whether to serve a page or a route. It will definitely warn you, but just as a measure of caution, you can create an API directory inside the app directory and you can house all of your API handlers there, or you can create API handlers parallel to your pages, but make sure route.ts file are not parallel to page.tsx file. Otherwise, you can use just any structure you want inside the app directory, right? So now you have the power of the APIs right inside the app directory. What else we can have here is we can have support for other verbs, right? So we can have totally support of a post method over here. Save this. and probably say a delete method over here, right? Save this. Now let's just go ahead and validate our API inside our REST API client. Hit send. Hit send. It's able to respond now. Do a post over here. Hit send. Do delete over here. Hit send. And it's working fine for us. Use one method that we haven't defined. Send. Nobody return for response. 4 or 5 method not allowed. Right? So our endpoint is working perfectly fine. Now let's just go ahead and see what else we can do with this. Right? So this is by default static, but this could be dynamic too, right? And how this could be dynamic is we need to either use a dynamic function, or we need to tell that this is a dynamic handler. So we'll just go ahead and use this value to say that it's always going to be dynamic, right? Open your handler file, and there you can say export const dynamic auto. You can also force this, right? Which means you can have something like a force dynamic. Save this. Come back. Dynamic segment, which means we can have params, right? So what if these routes were parameterized, right? So we can just open our Explorer panel, and there we can just say that let's rename this to post, right? Now inside post, what we can have is a listing, and then we can have dynamic params, right? Post ID, create a new directory. Inside the directory, let's just duplicate this. The route is over there. And here change this to posts. Now we'll just leave one of the get over here, remove this, and let's return an array with posts. All right. And here we'll just return objects, ID, title, Next.js is awesome. ID could be anything. Copy this, paste this. Let's make it to something else. The route handlers are awesome, right? So now this became our posts directory or our post API. Go back to your API client, change this to posts, and here change this to a get, send, and we are getting the response, right? Now what we can do now is we can just come back over here, and inside the route directory we can have the dynamic params, right? Let's just here just kind of it takes 2 parameters, right? One is request, another one is params, right? So we can just say that, hey, give us the params. There we can access the params ID, right? So let's just say that we need to return the params ID. The ID is params ID, right? Params ID. Save this. We don't need a post at this point. We can just remove this, and here we can say request, and here we can again say, that we need access to the params, and there we can just again say ID, params ID. Cool. So get and delete, two functions taking care of retrieving one single post and another one taking care of deleting one single post. Right, we can just open the Explorer again, open the route.ts file, and there we can just put a post. So this post will take care of creating new posts. Right, so let it be here only. We won't do much around this. Right, let's just use one of these IDs, open our REST client, and there say something like we are getting the ID, right? Remove this, send this, use this, put it over here, send this, and it's working for us, right? Change this to a delete, send this, it's working for us, right? These could come from your data sources, your DBs. Now let's say there is a fixture file. So create a fixture.ts, right? Inside the fixture.ts, just take this data and put it export const posts. Close this. Now once this is done, you can just reopen your index file, and there we can just import the fixture, import posts from fixture, and we can just return this instead of, right? So now we have all of the posts returned from here. Save this, open your REST client, send this. Yep, do a get, send. It's working for us. Now inside our other handlers, we will just import the post again. And here we can just use the ID to find the particular post, right? Const post is equal to post dot find post dot ID equal to params dot ID. Save this. If post return this, and there you can just say post else return next response dot, and there you can say error not found, right? This is saved. Come back to your REST client. This is working. Use one of the IDs, type it over here, send this. It's working. So you can do this for delete function also, or for any other verb handler that's gonna take care of individual entity, right, or individual item. So now this is perfectly orchestrated API inside our app directory, right? You can have a route over here, you can have a route inside here, and that's how you basically tackle API creation through Next.js. And that's how you take care of API handler orchestration inside Next.js Canary version today, and probably very soon enough in the Next.js stable version. Let's look at the next steps, right? So next steps, again, the same things that we just explored, right? We got access to the params and stuff. The params that we accessed is a part of the context API, right? The same the same route matching still works for you, right? So as you can see, you can have access to the cookies function inside Next.js API handler. This wasn't possible with Pages API. Similarly, you can get access to all of the headers, right? Follow. So this isn't possible with the Pages API approach that we currently follow. One more great thing we are able to do now with this route handler is that we can now stream the responses. So instead of serving all of the responses at a time, we can now actually stream the responses, right? So now you can call the API handlers at the compile time. You can call the API handlers at runtime. You can actually stream the responses. So there are a lot of great features coming in the Next.js stable version near you pretty soon. If you find the video informative, hope you find the video useful. See you in my next video. Bye-bye.